as I said, we had absolutely fabulous weekend, actually beginning of the week. So our son-in-law and daughter from Texas came in. Our son and daughter-in-law and their 3 kids from Indianapolis came in on Thursday. Of course, Isaiah and Faith are already here, and so fabulous time. We're at that new old house we bought, so built in 1961. And if the 60s ever come back, we're already ready for that. But it was beautiful weather, so the kids mostly ran around outdoors. Friday was the day. That night, all 3 of our kids and their spouses, they each only have 1 spouse, I'm just saying, all of them went out together and having dinner, and so we were left to watch the kids. Now, our youngest granddaughter, Sage, is only 3 months old, so she went with mom and dad there. But we had 3. So Cole's 10 months old, Nathan is 3 years old, and all that goes with that, and Ava is a very precocious 4-year-old, and we had the evening plan. So by 7 o'clock, we're out in the backyard, s'mores. Do you know that with 3-year-olds, you can get marshmallows in places I did not know marshmallow went? And even when you're close, somehow you get it all over. So what followed the s'mores was bath time, and they loved it. We didn't lose anybody at the bath time. And so there came this moment, but by this time it's about 9 o'clock at night, and Vicki went down the hall with Cole to put him to bed. I have the 4-year-old, 3-year-old laying on the floor in our living room. We've got a fire going, and I haven't watched children's TV in a while, but something called Bluey, right? It's a wonderful Australian children's show, and we watched a couple episodes of that, and I'm telling you, the more I watched, the more they watched, the heavier their eyes. It was a beautiful thing. By like 9:30, they're both asleep on the floor. I could turn off the TV. Vicki's putting Cole to bed. Listen to me. I'm reading the newspaper in my own living room with 3 grandkids there. They're asleep. I'm just telling you, it's like, I still got it. Been a long time. And I've been feeling great. And so Vicki comes back down the hall. Cole is also asleep. And so every parent in the room now is saying what? What happened next? 2 things happened in quick succession. The first was I heard crying from down the hall. And I mean, Cole was selling out. This was not a little bit of a cry. This was like, I need attention now. And so Grandma trotted back down the hall, and she's going to take care of it. At that moment, the Lord is my witness. I don't know what was happening, but I heard 2 sounds come from our 4-year-old daughter-in-law who was stretched out on the floor on the throw rug and the big giant stuffed bear. I heard, like that, in that order. I now had a problem to solve, a conflict to resolve, and an opportunity to seize. And since it was dark, and I don't want to wake her up, and her brother's laying right next to her, I thought, well, this was a polite vomit, right? Yeah, no, she absolutely sold out for this. It was projectile. It was across the floor. It was over the big giant bear. It was down her. And so I thought, as a parent, as a grandparent, my responsibility is not to clean up vomit. I've done that already. So men, I waited to see if Vicki would come back out. And I'm convinced that mothers and grandmothers have a 6th sense because she just didn't come back out. And every mom was like, oh yeah, we got that. So there came this moment when the guilt of like, my granddaughter is lying in vomit overcame the I don't want to touch the vomit. And so I went over there, it's kind of in the dark, I get on hands and knees, and I put my hand down, that's right in, squishing between the fingers. Now I've got a big problem to solve, big conflict to resolve, an opportunity to seize, and so like 4 towels later, a half a roll of paper towels later, everything cleaned up, and I just picked her up, and she just looked at me and said, hi, Grandpa, and dropped right back off to sleep. Cleaned her up, put her on the couch. Little Nathan was okay, he's fine, it's not gonna hurt him that much, he's good. And so just get that done. At that moment, you'll never convince me this was coincidence. At that moment, my wife walked back down the hallway. How's it going out here? Great. And just getting ready to sit down and start reading the paper again, and the kids came home for that. So my decision was, what do I do about this problem? And the thing as a grandfather I had to do was watch my heart. Because my heart was kind of like, I don't want to clean up this mess. I've paid my dues. And I also didn't want to have my grandchildren lying in vomit. And so I chose to lean in and solve that problem. we've been talking with Meant for More, this series, we've been talking about how do we solve a problem? How do we resolve a conflict? How do we seize an opportunity? In other words, in our context where we are currently, you may have a problem to solve, a conflict to resolve. You may have an opportunity to seize. And God has you there in your sphere of influence to do something about that. And you're going to choose, God willing, to do that. And I've loved the feedback on the series, right? Hey, this, and we're trying that. But here's what you're going to discover. When you get serious about stepping out and leading, you're going to face problems. We said 2 weeks ago, problems are the price you pay for progress. You choose to get serious about doing God's work in your generation, in your home, in your school, in your family, on your job, in our church, on your team. You're going to buy for yourself problems. That's what you're purchasing, okay? 2 weeks ago, we saw that Nehemiah's problems were external. The suburbs around Jerusalem, Nehemiah's meant for more. That is his problem to solve. His opportunity to seize was to rebuild the capital city of Israel. For 150 years, it had been lying in ruins, and he rebuilt it and made it a safe place for God's people to worship, a place that can shine the light of Old Testament gospel to the communities around. And in doing so, he faced problems. There were external threats. The suburbs around threatened. Last week we saw there were internal threats, problems on his own team, people getting sideways, people actually working against the stated goal of building the city. And Nehemiah leaned in and he solved it. But in Nehemiah chapter 6, and that's where we'll be today, Nehemiah chapter 6, he faced, I think, the most serious threat, and that was a personal threat. This wasn't external, this wasn't internal, this was personal. Nehemiah chapter 6, Nehemiah, his leadership, and we have increasingly in the previous weeks been narrowing our focus from what is our meant for more and how do I achieve our meant for more, how do I define my meant for more, to how do I lead. And if you're a person who has chosen to change things, to influence others, that's my definition of a leader, someone who influences toward a good cause or a good result, then this is for you. And you have discovered, as Nehemiah did, there are problems to deal with. And the challenge here, it's the most personal of any threats that he faced. The challenge here really centered on Nehemiah's heart as a leader. In other words, the most important thing we have to do as leaders, whether, again, it's in our home, it's on our team, it's in our school, it's on our job, it's in our church, is we have to guard our heart. In fact, there's a proverb, chapter 4, verse 23, that I have underlined in my Bible decades ago. Go ahead and put that up, Kent. Proverbs 4:23. I've recorded it here in 2 translations. The New International Version is a little more colloquial. It says this: above all else, guard your heart. Why? It is the wellspring of life. Just like a stream or a river has a source, a spring bubbling up that leads the direction of that river, so our hearts will determine and dictate where we go in life. The English Standard Version, a little more traditional, a little more literal. Keep your heart with all vigilance. Vigilance speaks of seeing, eyes on, being on guard. Guard or keep your heart with all vigilance. Why? For from it, that is your heart, flow the springs of life. It's just such a great turn of phrase. Like where you're going in life will mostly be dictated by your heart. How you respond to the inevitable challenges in your life and your family and your home and your school and this church and your job is going to be led by or flow out of your heart. And so I spent a little time this week thinking about my own experience as a leader in the home and different settings in our church, and I was able to identify in my experience 6 things, and you could probably fill this out with more, but 6 threats to a healthy heart for a leader. What are the kind of heart problems that leaders face? A heart trouble for leaders include discouragement. And all God's leaders said. You should say it louder than that. Discouragement means I see problems more than I see solutions. What's heart trouble for a leader? Anger. Now, anger means I've been wronged. And we've seen from Nehemiah, I said a few weeks ago, like, pray angry prayers. Nehemiah did. But anger can also debilitate. If you've ever heard, the advice, listen, if you don't express your anger, you're gonna squelch that. It's that old Freudian nonsense from 100 and something years ago. And we didn't know much about psychology. And the reality is, the more you express your anger, the more you become an angry person. Don't let anger derail what God's calling you to do. Because the problem is, the more we express anger, especially if we don't deal with it in a healthy way, it leads to the third heart trouble for leaders, bitterness. Bitterness says, I hold on to those wrongs. Like, get angry. We should. When a follower of Jesus Christ gets angry at injustice, it's a reflection of the character of God. He's angry at injustice as well. The whole wrath of God thing is not something that's outside God's character. It's very endemic, or it's very fundamental to his character. Somebody takes advantage of somebody else and harms them in a way, God's angry about that, and we should get angry too. But if we don't deal with the anger, if we're passive about it, it settles into bitterness, which is, I'm going to hold on to the wrongs. I'm not going to deal with the wrongs. 4, entitlement. Heart trouble for a leader, entitlement. That's the sense of, I deserve this. Be careful when the promotions come and you've accomplished some things in life. Be careful during the middle-age years of life that you don't let entitlement take root in your heart. Entitlement says, I deserve this. Can I give you an answer to that, a response from a leader? No, you don't. You've earned it. And when you quit earning it, you're going to forfeit your ability to lead as well. Do you know how we demonstrate a sense of entitlement? In the way we treat waiters and waitresses. Do you know how I've responded to inflation? Tipping 25, sometimes 50%. That seems ridiculous, except they make $8 an hour. And they often have kids at home. I'm not entitled. God's blessed. And I'm going to do everything in my power to just pay that forward. You have a sense of entitlement. How do you treat the FedEx driver, the Amazon driver, the mail carrier? If you are someone who has your car washed, someone who washes your car, it says a lot about who we are. Heart trouble for leaders, discouragement, anger, bitterness, entitlement. 5, arrogance. I'm better than others. Yeah, no. You may have been placed in a situation in life. You may have had opportunity. Maybe you've even seized or created your own opportunity. It doesn't make you better than others. It makes you more blessed than others. And with that blessing comes a responsibility to serve others. Your arrogance might be the greatest threat to your own ability to achieve in life the thing God has called you, equipped you to do. I'm better than others. 6th, isolation. It's a particular threat to our hearts because with advancing leadership and responsibility comes advancing privacy. I've got the key card to get into that department and somebody else doesn't. Nobody else has a key to my office. But my computer is my own computer. It's not going to be running through the IT systems. I have a phone that's my own phone. I can leave the office whenever I want. I don't clock in and clock out. And if we're not careful, that isolation can make us not only out of touch, but can also bring us temptations that somebody working the lines or running a press isn't going to face. Be careful, leader. Nehemiah's threat was very personal. Look at Nehemiah chapter 6. Nehemiah chapter 6. Here, if I could summarize the message, it would be this. The more personal the threats we face, the more important it is to guard your heart. Okay, so the more personal the threats you face, the more important it is to guard your heart. Nehemiah 6, there's threats. And let's see if we can just walk through the text quickly and identify 3 ways that Nehemiah guarded his heart. Because he modeled for us how you can crush it in your role. Because Nehemiah did. We'll see next week, got the promotion and ended up being governor for 12 years. That's a great run. But it didn't come without the threats, the problems. How do I guard my heart as a leader? Number 1, remember your mission. 3 ways to guard your heart as a leader. Number 1, remember the mission. Look at chapter 6, verse 1. And we've met these names before, these people. These are these are sort of political rivals. They would have been either the mayors or the regional governors of surrounding towns. Now, Sanballat and Tobiah, when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arab and the rest of our enemies heard that I had built the wall and that there was no breach left, although up till that time I had not set up the doors and gates. So what's happening is the wall is now completed. By the way, in 1967, they discovered remains of the wall in an excavation in Jerusalem. It's awesome. It demonstrated that it had been built quickly. It was kind of rough, but it was built. But until this time, they'd built the frames, but hadn't put the gates in, the doors in. So think about, you're building your house, it's all weathered in, it's all dried in, but the doors aren't hung yet. So there's kind of security, but not really. And verse 2, Sanballat Geshem sent to me saying, and it's important to note, this is private. It's a private invitation from a political leader to another political leader who's actually achieving some things in life. Come, let's meet together at Hakaphirim on the plain of Ono. It could be translated the. Hakaphirim is the Kepharim. It's a beautiful place. It was several miles from Jerusalem. It was north and west. The Valley of Ono is lush, and it's a beautiful place. Basically, they're saying, hey, you're one of us. You've succeeded in this thing now. Come on. Let's get away for a couple of days. And look at his response to that. I sent messengers to them. So again, private invitation. The response is a private answer. I sent messengers to them saying, now listen, he said at the end of verse 2, they intended to do me harm. I don't know how I knew that, other than leaders often have a sixth sense about these things, or he may have learned it later. But he doesn't make it critical or personal here. He's just like, hey, I just can't, my calendar's full. In fact, I love the turn of phrase, verse 3. I sent messengers saying, I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. A great work could be translated a huge project. It's not self-aggrandizement like I'm more important to you. It's saying, like, I got a lot of work to do here. And he's very near to the end. And look at the question, end of verse 3. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? In other words, no, I'm just not going to do this. God, you know what I love about this? Over and over again, Nehemiah remembered the mission. Like, yeah, lunch with you would be wonderful, gentlemen. But it would have been a day's journey there and a day's journey back and whatever the event would have been. I mean, maybe 3 days. And he's like, man, we're so close. Now, talk about persistence. Look at verse 4. And they sent to me, how many times? How many times? They sent to me how many times? Yeah, 4 times. In this way, and I answered them in the same manner. Like, guys, appreciate it. No. Remember your mission. Let me just pause for a moment here. We're week 7. If you're following along in the study guide, you realize that according to the study guide, we should be further along than we are. Well, you know me, can talk. So we'll actually wrap the series up next week. If you're following the study guide, next week will be when we'll talk about celebrating a job well done. But some of you have identified what is that meant for more, that problem to solve, that conflict to resolve, that opportunity to seize. Some of you have already started down that project. When I say remember the mission, here's what I'm saying, and I wrote it out this week. I want to make sure you're tracking with me. We're talking about a leader's heart. And God stirred your heart to do something to make a difference in this world. Do you believe to the core of your being that God wants to do something in you before he does something through you? Your answer should have been a resounding yes, so I'm going to read it again. You're going to guard your heart, leader. You've got to remember the mission. Because, by the way, this thing I'm reading is true. Do you believe to the core of your being that God wants to do something within you before he does something through you? Yes. Remember the mission. All right, well, what might he be doing within me? Developing your character, breaking your heart, rooting out sin, strengthening your soul, sharpening your purpose, blessing your future. Remember the mission. I said this the very first week of this series. Your meant for more will be real in your heart before it's real in your world. Is it real in your heart? Second, 3 ways that leaders can guard their hearts. Number 1, remember the mission. Second, check your motives. Look at verses 5 through 9. Nehemiah chapter 6, verses 5 through 9. In the same way, Sanballat, for the 5th time, talk about persistence, but the strategy changes. This is not a sealed envelope on parchment paper that, a government official would say, ooh, how nice is this? This is an attack on the integrity and the motives of Nehemiah, who's nearing the end of his meant for more. Sanballat, for the 5th time, sent his servant to me, look at this, with an open letter in his hand. Nehemiah 4 times has refused to meet with me. Here's what he's up to. And he reads it, the messenger reads it out loud in the presence of Nehemiah's subordinates, his team of co-workers, all the court officials. Here's what he says. It is reported among the nation, and Geshem says it's true. It's so true of rumor and gossip. It is reported. What? Who? Geshem. You mean the guy that's been against me from the beginning? That guy? Well, what's the word on the street? What's the gossip? What's the rumor? It is reported among the nations that you and the Jews intend to rebel. Oh, whoa. That's serious. That's treason. Now, I have the next 3 words underlined. That is why. Second way you're going to guard your heart is to remember your motive. You're going to remember the mission. Just check your motive. 3 words. That is why. Look at the rest of that sentence. You're building the wall. Really? I spent a little time on that this week because maybe in this whole text, these are the 3 words that jumped off the page more than ever. Because as a leader, motive matters, and all God's people said. Look at let me read it to you. Chapter 2, verse 10. Someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. That was his motive. Chapter 4, verse 14. Nehemiah said, do not be afraid. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome. And talk about motive. Fight for your brothers and your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. Who are you to think you can change your family or your team or your company? Who do you think you are to lean into a conflict? We've been living with this dysfunction for years. Because I'm working for the welfare of God's people. Because it's about my family and my home and my husband or my wife and my children and my sons and my grandsons and granddaughters, daughters and granddaughters. Check your motives. It's an open letter. This is why. Look, it goes on. Look at this. Back in chapter 6. According to these reports, you wish to become king. It goes on, you're going to rebel. And now look here's the invitation again. Look at the end of verse 7. Now come and let us take counsel together. He will help you unwind this problem you've caused. This wasn't private, this was public. And you deal with that kind of public motive questioning in a different way. Look at what Nehemiah did. He ignored the invitations. Very polite, no, thank you, my calendar's full. But when it got public and began undermining his leadership, he went public. I sent to him saying, no such things as you say have been done. I love the end of verse 8. You're inventing them up out of your own mind. You're just making this stuff up out of whole cloth. I love it. Facts are your friends. Nothing like what you are saying has been done. Nothing like what you are saying has been done. Now look at verse 9. Love it. Here's motive. They all wanted to frighten us, thinking their hand, I love this turn of phrase. It's so brilliantly written in Nehemiah's journal. Their hands will drop from the work. They're going to be so afraid of what the king's going to say, or the criticism they're getting, or the gossip and word on the street, they're going to just, hands are dropped, going to drop the bricks. No more work. So look at Nehemiah's prayer. You think this guy wasn't a brilliant leader? Look at his prayer at the end of verse 9. Now, O God, strengthen my hands. It's so good. The threat was our hands will lose strength. So I'm going to go straight to God, and I say, God, give me strength in my hands to do this meant for more. Motives had been checked. They were pure. They were clear. He's like, all right, Fido, forget it, drive on. We're getting through this thing. Look at the third threat. By the way, verse 9 says frightened. Verse 13 says afraid. So often your critic's motive is to make you fearful. You check your motives, and if they're clear, come on, pray for strong hands. Now, third and final, verse 10. All right, 3 ways leaders guard their heart. Remember your mission, check your motives. 3, sharpen your mind. Think. Having a strong faith is not an excuse for sloppy thinking. Nehemiah demonstrates courage grows when we're clear on mission, our motives are pure, and we've thought this stuff through. Look at verse 10. I went into the house of Shemaiah, the son of Deliah, the son of that guy, who was confined in his home. And what we find later is this guy, he was like a prophet. He was like a reported to be a man of God. He was an influential guy in Jerusalem. So he meets with Shemaiah, who's confined to his house. He gets there, they have their cup of tea, they're talking, and here's what Shemaiah says, verse 10. Let us meet together in the house of God within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple. Why? For they're coming to kill you. They are coming to kill you by night. This is really serious. And it's interesting that as a prophet, he almost dressed it up as a poem. They're coming to kill you. They're coming to kill you by night. It's real, it flows in the original. Wow. Now, my house has been broken into exactly once in life. I didn't sleep for 5 years. I don't think I slept right for 5 years after that. It's tough. You wake up, you realize that, you grab something, and I ran down the hall, chased the guy out of the house and into the backyard, and couldn't catch him. He's gone. He's apparently quicker than me. Nehemiah, under cover of darkness, they're not going to break in. They're going to kill you. And this is your friend, a reputed man of God. Now look at. Here's where Nehemiah is thinking clearly. Look at verse 11. They're coming to kill you. You need to run. In fact, let's go to church and lock the doors. In fact, let's go to the altar at church. Love Nehemiah's response. I said, and it's 2 questions. Should such a man as I run away? What's the answer? No. Leaders, they don't run away from problems. And if Nehemiah closes up shop and goes to hide out in the back of the church, guess what all his workers think? Well, is this important to you or not? There's going to come a time, leader, where you're going to have to face a threat and you're going to have to step forward and do it. Nehemiah does. And the second question, what man such as I could go into the temple and live? You think the temple's going to stop him? And by the way, I'm not supposed to go into that part of the temple. That's for priests, and I'm a governor. I love that in Israel there's a separation between the religious class and the governing class, and those two weren't supposed to be in cahoots together. Verse 12, love this. 2 words I have circled. And I understood, see where we get the idea of thinking clearly? And saw. Understood is I'm doing the math and saying this just doesn't make sense. Seeing is, and the implication is, I'm not going to do that thing. That God had not sent him. He had pronounced the prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. Oh, okay, I see. Follow the money, and it leads to a hired gun prophet. That's what you had. Now, look at verse 13. For this purpose he was hired that I should be afraid and act in this way and sin. Distill fear, or instill fear. Act this way means to run away. Sin means to cross boundaries in the church that I shouldn't be crossing. He's a governor, he's not a priest. Now, when you do that, they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. And then Nehemiah prays one of those others, lightning prayers, bullet prayer, just real quick sentence. Not remember me for good, but remember Sanballat and Tobiah for evil. And I love what one writer wrote this week. I think it sort of captured that idea of thinking clearly about your meant for more. He writes, only Nehemiah's faith and clear-headed resoluteness equipped him for the challenges that lie ahead. So, leader, you face pushback, criticism, questioning of your motives. think. And if it doesn't add up, one of the things I would say just quickly is, if you're getting counsel from people, yeah, you should do this. People, yeah, you should do this. And there's one piece of counsel that totally stands out as not aligning, you may want to give some thought to why. Now, next week, we'll take a look at chapter 7 and just a little bit in chapter 12 about how you celebrate, because look at verse 15, look at verse 16, Nehemiah 6, look at it. So the wall was completed, it was finished. In the face of external, internal, and personal threats, he got her done. If there's one thing you and I lack, we often lack the understanding of how important it is to celebrate those achievements. And so we'll talk about that next week. Let me close with prayer. Let me close by pointing to Jesus Christ, who finished his meant for more. Father, I pray for men and women sitting here, those who are watching, those who are online joining us, those who will watch this later, that we would not divorce our purpose, our meant for more, our problem or our conflict or our opportunity. We not divorce that from pure motives and clear thinking. That on a regular basis we would go back to why, what. And Father, in this moment, thank you for the person of Jesus Christ, whose mission was to redeem us, make us right. Thank you, Father, for his time on the cross, where he bore the sin of the world, so that all who believe that simple truth would be free. So, Lord, I pray that you would give us courage to move forward in the face of obstacles. Give us the grace to overcome the questioning motives. Give us the strength to persevere, I pray. And I ask this in Jesus' strong name, and all God's people agreed by saying, amen. Let me read over you this blessing. It's become something of a every week kind of thing here because, well, first of all, here's what the scriptures say. This way you shall bless the people. Will you stand with me now? The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen. Now go in peace.